Listen carefully, because this moment is not ordinary. This is not just another video you happen to click. This is not background noise while you scroll, distracted and detached. No, something deeper is happening right now. Something intentional. Something spiritual. Something that has been moving toward you long before you even pressed play. And the question you must ask yourself is this: why now? Why, after everything you've been through, after the waiting, the confusion, the silent battles, why did this message find you at this exact moment? Archangel Michael steps forward, not in silence, but in authority. His presence is not gentle today. He is urgent, focused, precise, because what he is about to reveal is connected to something you said 3 years ago. Yes, 3 years. Think back for a moment. Do you remember that night? The one where you felt like everything was closing in. The moment where you sat alone, maybe in your room, maybe in the dark, maybe with tears in your eyes, and you whispered something to God that no one else heard. You didn't post about it. You didn't tell your friends. You didn't even fully understand what you were asking for, but heaven heard it. And heaven recorded it. There was a prayer, not polished, not perfect, but real. Desperate. Honest. A prayer that came from a place so deep within you that even you couldn't fully explain it. A prayer about your future, your finances, your stability, your breakthrough. You asked for change. You asked for release. You asked for something better than what you were living in. And then nothing happened. Days passed. Weeks passed. Months turned into years. And slowly something inside you began to shift. Not upward, but inward. You started questioning. You started wondering if maybe you asked for too much. Maybe it wasn't your time. Maybe you misunderstood God. Maybe, just maybe, that prayer wasn't meant to be answered. But here is what Archangel Michael is revealing right now. It was never ignored. Not for a second. What felt like silence was actually strategy. What felt like delay was actually design. What felt like abandonment was actually preparation. Because the kind of prayer you pray could not be answered quickly. It required movement in places you could not see. It required alignment of people you have never met. It required doors to close before the right ones could open. It required you to grow into the version of yourself that could actually handle the answer. And that process took time. But now something has changed. Can you feel it? There has been a subtle shift in your life recently. Things don't feel exactly the same anymore. Maybe you've noticed it in your thoughts, maybe in your energy, maybe in the way certain situations are no longer affecting you the way they used to, or maybe there's just this unexplainable feeling. Like something is coming. Like something is building. Like something is about to break open. That feeling. That tension. That anticipation. That is not anxiety. That is alignment. Because the spiritual atmosphere around you has begun to move again. And when heaven starts moving, it doesn't whisper. It signals. This message is one of those signals. You are not here by accident. You were guided here. Because the same prayer you thought was buried in the past has just been activated in your present. Archangel Michael says, the time of waiting is reaching its end. The time of release is approaching. But you must recognize the moment when it arrives. And that moment has already begun. So do not scroll away. Do not disconnect. Do not treat this lightly. Because what you are stepping into now is directly tied to what you cried out for then. 3 years ago you asked it. Today heaven answers. And this time it will not look the way you expect. It will be bigger, faster, and more precise than anything you imagined. But only if you stay aware. Only if you stay aligned. Only if you are ready to receive. Because this is your summons. And once you recognize it, everything begins to change. Type "I am ready" in the comments if you feel this shift. Blessing code 3003 is now activated around you. There is something you need to understand now, something that may challenge the way you've been looking at your own life. That prayer you whispered 3 years ago, it never faded. It never dissolved into silence. It never disappeared into the emptiness you thought surrounded you in that moment. Oh, it ascended. It moved. It was carried into a realm where nothing sincere is ever lost. And yet, from your perspective, it felt like it vanished. You went back to your routine. You kept moving through life. You adapted, adjusted, survived. But deep down, there was always a quiet echo of that moment. A faint memory that would surface when things got hard again. A thought that would whisper, "What happened to that prayer?" And slowly, without even realizing it, you began to detach from it. Not because you stopped believing, but because believing without seeing became exhausting. You told yourself to be patient. You told yourself to trust the process. You told yourself that timing matters. But as time stretched on, patience started turning into doubt. You began to reinterpret that moment. You started to question whether it was really as significant as it felt. Maybe it was just emotion. Maybe it was just a reaction to stress. Maybe it wasn't as spiritual as you thought. But listen carefully now, because this is where the truth shifts everything. Heaven does not measure your prayers by how polished they sound. Heaven responds to sincerity, not perfection. And what you released in that moment carried a weight that your natural mind could never fully comprehend. That prayer was not small. It was not ordinary. It was not casual. It was a turning point. Even though nothing changed immediately around you, everything began to move beyond you. There were adjustments taking place that you could not see. Realignments that did not involve your awareness. Certain doors had to be delayed because stepping through them too early would have placed you in environments you were not ready to navigate. Certain opportunities had to pass you by because accepting them meant that time would have limited something far greater that was being prepared ahead. And here is the part that may be difficult to accept, but it is necessary. You were not ready then for what you are about to receive now. Not because you lacked worth, not because you were unqualified, but because the version of you at that time was still carrying patterns, fears, and limitations that would have conflicted with the magnitude of what you asked for. So instead of giving you a partial answer, Heaven chose to build you into the answer. That is why the process felt slow. That is why it felt like nothing was happening. That is why you experienced moments of frustration, moments of confusion, moments where you felt like you were standing still while everyone else seemed to be moving forward. Because while you were observing your external life, Heaven was working on your internal capacity. You were being stretched. You were being refined. You were being taught how to hold, manage, and sustain something greater. And during that time, something else was happening that you may not have noticed. Your desires started to change. Things that once felt important began to lose their grip on you. Situations that once controlled your emotions started to affect you less. You began to outgrow certain mindsets, certain environments, certain expectations. That was not random. That was preparation. Because the prayer you prayed required a different version of you to receive it. And now the version of you has emerged. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. Enough to recognize what is coming. Enough to not sabotage it. Enough to not misinterpret it. Enough to step into it with awareness instead of fear. Archangel Michael speaks again with clarity. What was delayed was never denied. What was held back was being multiplied. and what is now approaching carries more than what was originally requested. Do you understand what that means? It means the answer you are about to receive is not equal to what you asked for. It is greater. Because time did not weaken your prayer, it expanded it. Every moment of waiting added weight to it. Every moment of endurance gave it depth. Every moment of faith, even when it felt fragile, kept it alive. And now that prayer stands before you, not as a memory but as a manifestation in motion. This is why you have been feeling a shift. This is why things feel different. Because you are no longer waiting for something to begin. You are standing at the edge of something that has already been set into motion. So do not dismiss this moment. Do not reduce it to coincidence. Do not talk yourself out of what your spirit is recognizing. Because the same prayer you thought was forgotten is now returning to you with precision. And this time, it will not pass you by. It will meet you where you are. But you must stay aware enough to receive it. You must stay grounded enough to recognize it. You must stay aligned enough to not miss it. Because what is coming next will require your full attention. Type "I remember my prayer" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 2112 is now activated around you. You have been calling it delay, but heaven has been calling it positioning. And that difference changes everything. Because what you experienced over the last 3 years was not a pause without purpose. It was not time wasted. It was not a season where nothing was happening. No, it was a carefully orchestrated process where every moment, every setback, every unexpected turn was aligning you with something far greater than you could have handled back then. But from where you stood, it didn't feel like alignment. It felt like being stuck. It felt like watching others move ahead while you remained in the same place. It felt like doors opened just enough to give you hope, only to close again without explanation. It felt like progress would start and then suddenly stop. And the most frustrating part was not the delay itself, but the lack of clarity around it. You kept asking, "Why is this taking so long?" And the silence that followed made it even harder to trust. But listen closely now, because this is where the truth begins to reveal itself. Delays that come from life feel chaotic. They feel random. They feel disconnected. But divine delays, they are precise. They are intentional. They are structured in a way that you can only understand once you are no longer inside them. During those years, things were being rearranged in ways you could not detect. Certain paths you thought were right for you were quietly being redirected. Certain connections you believed were necessary were being loosened. Certain versions of success that once seemed ideal were being removed from your future. And you didn't always notice it happening. Sometimes it showed up as disappointment. Sometimes it showed up as rejection. Sometimes it showed up as things simply not working out no matter how hard you tried. But none of it was random. It was protection. Because had those doors stayed open, you would have stepped into environments that were not aligned with what you truly asked for. You would have accepted outcomes that looked like answers, but would have limited the fullness of what was being prepared. So instead of allowing you to settle, heaven allowed you to wait. And waiting is one of the most misunderstood parts of transformation. Because when you were waiting, you were also changing. Your thinking began to shift. Your tolerance for certain situations began to decrease. Your awareness started to sharpen. You began to see patterns more clearly. You started recognizing what drains you, what distracts you, what delays you. You became more selective, more intentional, more aware of your own direction. And that change was necessary. Because the version of you that exists now is not the same version that made that prayer 3 years ago. You are more grounded. You are more observant. You are less impulsive. You are more capable of handling responsibility without being overwhelmed by it. And most importantly, you are less likely to accept something that does not fully align with what you asked for. That is positioning. Archangel Michael reveals this with precision. What you thought was being withheld was being redirected. What you thought was being blocked was being preserved. And what you thought was delay was the final alignment before release. That means every moment you questioned had purpose. Every time something did not work out, it was guiding you away from something incomplete. Every time you felt like giving up, you were closer than you realized. Because positioning does not always feel like progress. Sometimes it feels like confusion before clarity. Sometimes it feels like isolation before elevation. Sometimes it feels like everything is slowing down right before everything begins to accelerate. And that is exactly where you are now, at the edge of acceleration. Because once positioning is complete, movement begins quickly. The same doors that once resisted you will begin to open with less effort. The same situations that once confused you will start making sense. The same areas of your life that felt stagnant will begin to move with unexpected speed. And this is where many people miss their moment. Because after experiencing delay for so long, they hesitate when things finally begin to move. They question it. They doubt it. They wonder if it's real. But this is not the time to hesitate. This is the time to recognize. Because what is about to happen next will not feel like the past. It will feel different. It will feel aligned. It will feel like things are finally falling into place without force. And when that happens, you must not shrink back into the mindset you carried during the delay. You must step forward as the version of yourself that was built during it. Because the delay did not disqualify you and prepared you. And now preparation is turning into manifestation. Type "I trust the timing" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 3223 is now activated around you. And as this truth settles into your spirit, understand this: what has been poured into you is not meant to stop with you. Just as a seed sown in faith brings forth a harvest, your act of giving becomes a channel through which this message reaches another soul standing in their moment of waiting. The word declares, "Give, and it shall be given unto you," not as a distant promise, but as a living exchange that activates even now. I feel led to say this clearly. This is your moment to participate in something greater than yourself. When you sow through the PayPal link in the description or the QR code on your screen, you are not supporting a message. You are igniting light in places where darkness has lingered too long. Do not delay what your spirit is prompting you to do. Let your action today become a prophetic response that opens doors not only for others, but for you as well. Step forward in obedience and release your seed now. There is something you must see clearly now, because until you see it, you will continue to misunderstand what you have been walking through. What you thought was misfortune was not misfortune. What you thought was bad timing was not bad timing. What you thought was simply life being difficult was something much deeper. There has been a battle, not visible to your eyes, not obvious in your surroundings, but real, precise, and intentional. A battle over your access. A battle over your opportunities. A battle over your financial expansion, your stability, your ability to step into something greater than what you have known. Because the prayer you made 3 years ago did not just request change, it activated movement. And whenever movement begins at that level, resistance follows. Not to destroy you, but to test your alignment. And for a long time, you interpreted that resistance as failure. You saw doors close and assumed you were being rejected. You experienced setbacks and believed you were being delayed. You faced limitations and concluded that things simply were not working in your favor. But Archangel Michael reveals something that shifts your understanding completely. What you faced was not denial, it was interference. And what was interfered with could not be taken, only delayed until alignment was complete. That means nothing assigned to you was ever lost. It means nothing meant for you was given to someone else permanently. It means that even when it looked like opportunities passed you by, they were never removed from your path, only postponed until you could meet them at the right level. Because what you were asking for was not small. You were not asking for survival. You were asking for elevation. And elevation changes everything. It changes your environment. It changes your responsibilities. It changes the way people interact with you. It changes the expectations placed on you. And because of that, it requires a different level of awareness. During these past 3 years, there were moments where you came close. Moments where something all was worth it. Moments where it felt like you were about to step into something significant, and then suddenly, it shifted. At the time, it felt frustrating. But now you must understand those moments were previews. They were glimpses of what was ahead. But they were not fully aligned yet. Because there were still things around you that needed to be adjusted. Certain influences that needed to be removed. Certain patterns that needed to be broken. Certain ways of thinking that needed to evolve. Because if you had stepped fully into what was ahead while still carrying those elements, you would have struggled to sustain it. And sustaining something is far more important than receiving it. Anyone can step into an opportunity, but not everyone can maintain it. Not everyone can grow it. Not everyone can protect it. And that is why this process took time. Because heaven was not preparing you just to receive something. It was preparing you to hold it without losing it. And while that preparation was happening, the resistance continued. Subtle at times, obvious at others. Moments where things felt blocked for no clear reason. Moments where progress slowed down unexpectedly. Moments where your energy felt drained without explanation. Those were not random experiences. They were part of the tension between where you were and where you were being positioned to go. Because when something greater is assigned to you, there is always a period where your current reality no longer fits, but your next reality has not fully arrived. That space in between is where the battle feels strongest. And that is exactly where you have been. But now something has shifted. The intensity of that resistance is beginning to weaken. The delays are no longer holding the same weight. The confusion is starting to clear. And what once felt blocked is beginning to open. Not because the battle suddenly disappeared, but because your positioning is now complete. Archangel Michael declares, what was contested hath been secured. What was delayed hath been released. And what was prepared is now ready to enter your hands. That means the fight over your access is ending. Not gradually, but decisively. And as that shift takes place, you will begin to notice something. Things will start moving without the same resistance. Opportunities will appear without the same struggle. Decisions will feel clearer. Direction will feel stronger. And the effort you once had to force will begin to feel natural. That is how you will know the battle has turned. Because what once required strain will now respond to alignment. But you must remain aware. Because when things begin to open after a long period of resistance, it is easy to move too quickly. It is easy to overlook details. It is easy to assume that everything that appears is meant for you. And that is not the case. Discernment is still required. Clarity is still necessary. Because now that the battle has shifted, selection becomes important. Not everything that opens is the right door. But the right doors will feel different. They will not carry the same confusion. They will not require you to compromise. They will not pull you back into the version of yourself you have already outgrown. They will match the alignment you have been prepared for. And when you recognize them, you must be ready to step forward, without hesitation, without doubt, without returning to the mindset that was shaped during the delay. Because this is no longer the season of waiting. This is the season of receiving. And what is coming into your life now has already been fought for. Type "I receive what is mine" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 4440 is now activated around you. Something has changed and you have already felt it, even if you could not explain it. It did not come with an announcement. It did not arrive with visible signs that everyone could recognize. But within you, there has been a shift. A quiet but undeniable movement that has altered the way things feel, the way things flow, and the way things respond to you. This is not imagination. This is not coincidence. This is the beginning of a shift in what can only be described as your spiritual economy. Because for a long time, it felt like what you gave did not return. It felt like your effort did not match your results. It felt like you were investing your time, your energy, your focus, and yet the outcomes remained limited, delayed, or inconsistent. You kept showing up. You kept trying. You kept believing. But the exchange felt uneven, and that imbalance created frustration. It made you question whether you were doing something wrong. It made you wonder if you were missing something that others seemed to understand. It made you feel like no matter how much you adjusted, the results did not fully reflect your effort. But now you must understand something critical. The system you were operating in has shifted. Archangel Michael reveals this with clarity. What once required force will now respond to alignment. What once resisted you will now recognize you. And what once bypassed you will now begin to return. This means the rules that governed your previous season are no longer the same. The effort you once had to exert will no longer be required in the same way. The struggle that once defined your progress will no longer dictate your outcomes. Because you are no longer operating from the same level of positioning. And when positioning changes, flow changes. You will begin to notice this in subtle ways at first. Things that used to take longer will begin to happen faster. Situations that once felt complicated will begin to simplify. Decisions that once created confusion will begin to feel clear. Opportunities that once seemed distant will begin to come closer without you chasing them in the same way. And this is where you must be careful. Because when things begin to move differently, your instinct may be to apply the same habits that were formed during the previous season. You may try to force what no longer needs force. You may try to control what now requires trust. You may try to overthink what is meant to flow. But this is a new phase. And new phases require new awareness. Because the shift you are entering is not about doing more. It is about being aligned differently. For 3 years you were building discipline, resilience, awareness. You were learning how to persist even when things did not respond immediately. You were learning how to hold your focus even when results were delayed. But now the lesson is changing. And now, the lesson is about recognition. Recognizing when something is aligned. Recognizing when something is opening. Recognizing when something is meant for you without needing constant confirmation. Because what is coming into your life now will not require the same struggle to maintain. It will feel different. It will feel stable. It will feel like something that belongs. And that feeling is your confirmation. But there is something else you must understand about this shift. When the flow begins to change, it does not just affect you. It affects everything connected to you. The people around you will begin to respond differently. The way conversations unfold will begin to shift. The opportunities that appear will not look the same as before. Because the environment around you adjusts when your position changes. And that adjustment can feel unfamiliar at first. It can feel like things are moving too quickly. It can feel like you are stepping into situations you did not expect. It can feel like you are being pulled into something bigger without having full control over every detail. But that is part of the shift. Because control was necessary in the previous season. But now trust becomes more important. Not blind trust. Not careless movement. But a grounded, aware trust that recognizes alignment when it appears. Archangel Michael speaks again. The flow has changed. The exchange has shifted. And what you release will now return with greater measure than before. This means your actions now carry a different weight. Your decisions now create a different impact. Your movement now generates a different response. Because you are no longer operating in a cycle of delay. You are stepping into a cycle of return. And when return begins, it does not always come in the same form that you expect. Sometimes it comes through opportunities. Sometimes through connections. Sometimes through ideas. Sometimes through timing that aligns perfectly without effort. But regardless of how it arrives, it will carry a sense of rightness. A sense that this is what you have been preparing for. And when that moment comes, you must not hesitate. Because hesitation belongs to the old season. This new season responds to readiness. So stay aware. Stay grounded. Stay aligned with what you have already been built into. Because the shift has already begun. And what is coming next will confirm it even more clearly. Type "I feel the shift" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 5550 is now activated around you. There is a truth you have felt, but maybe you have not fully accepted yet. Not everyone was meant to come with you. And that realization has not been easy. Because the shifts in your relationships over the past 3 years were not always loud or dramatic. In many cases, they were quiet, subtle, almost unnoticeable at first. Conversations became shorter. Energy felt different. The connection that once felt natural began to feel forced. And you tried to hold on to it. You tried to understand it. You tried to maintain what once existed. But no matter how much effort you gave, something had already changed. And what you must understand now is this: those changes were not random. They were part of your positioning. Because the prayer you made did not just request financial change. It requested elevation. And elevation does not only affect what you receive, it affects who can stand beside you when you receive it. There were people in your life who were aligned with your previous season. They knew you in a certain way. They understood you based on where you were, not where you were going. And while those connections may have been real, they were not designed to stretch into the next level you were being prepared for. So distance began to form. Not always through conflict. Not always through clear endings. But through a gradual shift in alignment. And that shift created confusion. You wondered if you did something wrong. You questioned whether you should have tried harder. You replayed conversations in your mind, searching for answers that never fully came. But the truth is, it was not about something you did. It was about something you were becoming. Because as you grew, your needs changed. Your mindset evolved. Your tolerance for certain behaviors decreased. Your awareness sharpened. And the more you aligned with that growth, the more certain connections began to feel out of place. Not because those people were bad, but because they were no longer aligned. Archangel Michael speaks with clarity here. Separation is not always loss. Sometimes it is protection. Sometimes it is preparation. And sometimes it is the only way forward. That means what you experienced was necessary. Because had those connections remained the same, they would have influenced your decisions, your thinking, and your direction in ways that conflicted with what you were being prepared to receive. They would have kept you anchored to a version of yourself that you have already outgrown, and that would have created tension, not just externally but internally. You would have felt pulled in two directions. One part of you moving forward, another part of you trying to stay connected to what no longer fits. And that kind of tension slows everything down. So instead of allowing that to happen, the separation occurred. And even though it may have felt like loss, it created space. Space for clarity. Space for growth. Space for new alignment. Because what is coming into your life now requires that space. It requires you to be surrounded by people who understand your direction, not just your past. People who support your movement, not question it. People who can stand in the same level of awareness that you have developed, not pull you back into old patterns. And this is where many people struggle. Because when new alignment begins to form, there is often a period where it has not fully arrived yet. The old connections have shifted. The new ones have not fully established themselves. And in that space it can feel lonely. It can feel like you are standing between two worlds, no longer connected to what was but not fully anchored in what is coming. But that space is temporary, and it is necessary, because it allows you to stabilize within yourself before new connections are introduced. It allows you to become clear about what you need, what you value, and what you will no longer accept, so that when the right people do enter your life, you recognize them. You do not question them. You do not overlook them. You do not allow them to pass by unnoticed, because now your awareness is sharper. Your alignment is stronger, and your discernment is clearer. Archangel Michael declares, "What was removed made room. What created distance created direction. And what ended has already made way for what is about to begin. So do not look back with regret. Do not try to force reconnection where alignment no longer exists. Do not interpret distance as failure, because what had been cleared was cleared for a reason, and what is about to enter your life will confirm that. You will begin to notice it soon. Conversations that feel natural, connections that feel aligned, people who understand your direction without needing constant explanation. And when those connections appear, you must be ready to receive them without comparing them to the past, because they are not meant to replace what was. They are meant to support what is coming. This is part of the transition. This is part of the preparation. This is part of the answer to the prayer you made. Because elevation does not happen in isolation. It happens in alignment. And now that alignment is forming, type "I accept the shift" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 6661 is now activated around you. Now listen carefully, because this is where everything begins to shift from understanding into experience. You have heard about the preparation. You have felt the delay. You have endured the separation. You have questioned the process. But there comes a moment, very specific, very precise, where all of that transitions into movement. That moment is called release, and it does not always arrive the way you expect. In fact, for most people, it arrives quietly at first, not with a dramatic announcement, not with immediate confirmation, but with a door, a single opening that seems smallest insignificant until you recognize what it leads to. Because the nature of divine release is not to overwhelm you instantly, but to introduce you step by step into what has already been prepared. And when that first door opens, your instinct may be to question it. You may wonder, is this it? You may hesitate, thinking it is too simple, too easy, too different from what you imagine. But this is where awareness becomes critical. Because what you have been waiting for will not feel like struggle. It will not feel like forcing something into place. It will feel aligned. It will feel natural. It will feel like something is finally responding to you instead of resisting you. Archangel Michael reveals this clearly. When the door is yours, it does not compete with confusion. It carries clarity. It carries movement. And it carries peace, even when it stretches you. That means the doors that are about to open in your life will not come with the same resistance you experienced before. They will not require you to chase them endlessly. They will not demand that you prove yourself beyond what is necessary. Instead, they will meet you at the level you have been prepared for. And that is what will make them feel different. You will notice that conversations begin to flow without tension. You will notice that opportunities begin to align without excessive effort. You will notice that decisions become clearer without constant overthinking. And most importantly, you will notice that timing begins to work in your favor. Things will start happening at the right moment. Not too early, not too late, but exactly when they need to. And that precision is your confirmation. Because for 3 years timing felt off. Things came too soon and fell apart. Or they came too late and lost their impact. But now timing begins to align with your readiness. And that is when acceleration begins. But there is something you must guard against in this moment. Because when doors begin to open after a long period of delay, there is a tendency to move too quickly. To say yes to everything. To step into every opportunity without discernment. To assume that every open door is meant for you. But that is not the case. Because even in a season of release, alignment still matters. Not every opportunity is your assignment. Not every open door leads to your destination. And this is where your growth over the past 3 years becomes essential. Because now, you are not choosing from a place of desperation. You are choosing from a place of awareness. You are no longer trying to escape where you are. You are stepping into where you belong. And that difference changes the way you move. Archangel Michael declares, the release has begun. But selection will determine the outcome. Choose what aligns, not what appears. That means you must stay grounded. You must stay present. You must stay connected to the clarity you have developed. Because the right doors will not confuse you. They will not pressure you. They will not pull you into something that feels misaligned. They will stand open and allow you to step forward with confidence. And when you recognize those doors, you must not hesitate. Because hesitation belongs to the old season. The season where you were uncertain. The season where you doubted your own direction. But that season is over. This is a season of movement. A season of response. A season where what you have been preparing for begins to take form in real ways. And as this begins to unfold, you will start to see something clearly. What once felt impossible becomes accessible. What once felt distant becomes present. What once felt uncertain becomes undefined. And in that moment you will realize something. You were never waiting for the door. The door was waiting for you. Waiting for you to become the version of yourself that could walk through it without losing your direction. Waiting for you to develop the awareness to recognize it. Waiting for you to reach the point where you no longer question whether you deserve it. And now that moment has arrived. So when the door opens, step forward. Not with fear, not with hesitation, but with clarity. Because this is not the beginning of something random. This is the continuation of something that has been prepared for you for 3 years. Type "I step forward" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 7772 is now activated around you. Now we arrive at the moment you have been sensing, the moment that has been building beneath everything you have experienced. This is not just about doors opening. This is about what comes through those doors. Because what is approaching your life now is not random opportunity. It is not scattered progress. It is not temporary relief. It is a transfer. And you must understand the weight of that word. Because a transfer means something is being moved from one place into another. Something that already exists. Something that already carries value. Something that has already been built, established, or prepared is now being redirected. And in this case it is being redirected toward you. But not without reason. Not without purpose. Not without alignment. Archangel Michael reveals this clearly. What is coming into your hands is not new, it is assigned. It was always meant to reach you, but only when you were prepared to receive it. That means what you are about to step into has history. It has structure. It has weight. And it has the capacity to expand beyond what you originally imagined. This is why the process took 3 years. Because this kind of transfer is not just about receiving something. It is about becoming someone who can handle it without losing direction. And now that readiness has been established. But here is what you must see clearly. This transfer is not limited to one form. It will not arrive in only one way. It may show up as financial increase. It may show up as access to opportunities that were once out of reach. It may show up as connections that open doors you could not open on your own. It may show up as ideas that carry value and can be built into something significant. But regardless of the form it takes, it will carry one consistent feeling. Alignment. It will feel like something that fits. Not something you have to force. Not something you have to chase. But something that meets you where you are and expands with you as you move forward. And this is where many people misunderstand the concept of a wealth transfer. They expect it to appear instantly fully formed without responsibility. But that is not how it works. Because what is being transferred is not just wealth. It is responsibility. It is stewardship. It is the ability to manage, grow, and sustain what hath been placed in your hands. And that is why you had to be prepared. Because without that preparation the transfer would not last. It would slip through your hands. It would become overwhelming. It would create pressure instead of progress. But now you are different. You have developed the awareness to recognize value. You have developed the discipline to manage what you receive. You have developed the clarity to make decisions that align with long-term growth, not short-term relief. And that is what qualifies you for this moment. Archangel Michael declares, the transfer is not a reward. It is a responsibility given to those who have proven they will not waste it. So when this begins to unfold in your life, you must approach it differently. You must not treat it casually. You must not assume it will always be there without effort. You must not allow distractions to pull you away from what has been placed in your hands. Because what you receive now has the potential to change everything. Not just for you, but for what comes after you. And this is why it had to be delayed. Because what is being placed in your hands is not temporary. It is foundational. It is something that can be built upon. Something that can expand. Something that can create stability beyond what you have known. But only if it is handled correctly. And that is where your focus must remain. Not on the excitement of receiving, but on the responsibility of sustaining. Because the moment of transfer is only the beginning. What you do after that moment determines everything. And you are now in a position to do it differently. To think differently. To move differently. To build something that lasts instead of something that fades. So when this transfer begins to show itself, recognize it. Accept it. And step into it with awareness. Because this is not just an answer to your prayer. This is the beginning of something that will continue to unfold far beyond what you can currently see. Type "I accept the transfer" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 8883 is now activated around you. And as this revelation settles into your spirit, understand this truth: what is being transferred into your hands is not meant to stop with you. Just as rivers flow and never hoard the water they carry, what God releases through you is meant to reach others still waiting in their season of delay. The Word declares, "Test me in this and see if I will not open the windows of heaven." And this is that moment where your action becomes your agreement with heaven. I feel this strongly. This is your opportunity to step into alignment, not just in receiving, but in releasing. When you give through the PayPal link in the description, or the QR code on your screen, you are not supporting content. You are activating a flow that carries this message into lives that are still searching for clarity. Do not hesitate in this moment. Let your giving become a prophetic act that multiplies beyond what you can see. Step forward now and release your seed. Now listen closely, because this part carries weight. Everything you have heard so far speaks about preparation, alignment, and release. It speaks about doors opening, about transfer, about movement finally beginning after years of delay. But there is something that must be understood clearly at this stage, because what comes next will determine whether what you receive continues to grow or quietly begins to slip away. This is the warning. Not a warning of fear, but a warning of awareness. Because what heaven is releasing into your life now must be handled differently than anything you have managed before. You cannot approach it with the same mindset you had during the season of waiting. You cannot treat it with the same habits that were formed when you were operating from lack, from delay, from uncertainty. Because if you do, you risk mismanaging what was carefully prepared for you. Archangel Michael speaks with precision. What is given in alignment must be sustained with discipline. What is received with clarity must be protected with awareness. And what is placed in your hands must not be handled with the mindset of your past. That means your thinking must shift. Because during the past 3 years, you were in a position where you had to hold on tightly. You had to control what little you had. You had to make decisions based on limitation, based on caution, based on survival. And those habits, while necessary then, cannot guide you now. Because what is coming into your life requires expansion, not contraction. It requires stewardship, not fear. It requires intentional movement, not reactive decisions. And this is where many people fail to sustain what they receive. They step into increase but carry the mindset of lack. They receive opportunity but approach it with hesitation and doubt. They are given access but do not fully step into it because they are still thinking like the version of themselves that struggled to get there. And that disconnect creates instability. But that is not your path. Because you have been prepared to recognize this. You have been positioned to understand this. And now you must apply it. Because what you receive next will require clarity in your decisions. It will require discipline in your actions. It will require consistency in how you manage what is placed in your hands. And most importantly, it will require you to remain aligned with the version of yourself you have become, not the variant you use it to be. Because returning to old patterns even briefly can disrupt what is being built. Old habits of overthinking. Old habits of second-guessing. Old habits of saying yes too quickly or saying no out of fear. Old habits of seeking validation from people who are not aligned with your direction. Those patterns must not follow you into this season. Because this season responds to awareness. It responds to clarity. It responds to intentional movement. Archangel Michael declares, guard what is given. Not with fear, but with understanding. Not with hesitation, but with wisdom. Because what you protect will grow, and what you neglect will fade. That means you must stay present. You must pay attention to what is unfolding. You must recognize when something requires your focus and when something is a distraction. Because with increase comes options, and not every option is aligned. Not every opportunity is meant to be accepted. Not every direction is meant to be pursued. And this is where your discernment becomes critical. Because the same awareness that helped you navigate the delay must now help you navigate the release. You must learn to move without rushing, to decide without pressure, to act without losing clarity. Because what is being built now is not temporary. It is foundational. It is something that has the potential to expand over time if it is handled correctly. And you are now in a position to do that. To manage differently, to think differently, to move with intention instead of reaction. Because this is not just about receiving something. It is about becoming someone who can sustain it and grow it beyond its initial form. So take this seriously. Not with fear but with focus. Not with pressure but with purpose. Because what you do in this stage will determine what happens next. And you are ready for this. You have already proven that through the process you have endured. Now it is time to apply what you have learned. Type "I will handle IT wisely" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 9994 is now activated around you. Now prepare yourself because what is about to unfold will not match the pace you have become used to. For 3 years, your life moved in what felt like slow motion. Progress took time. Answers took time. Movement required patience. And because of that, you adapted to a slower rhythm. You learned how to wait. You learned how to endure. You learned how to keep going even when results were not immediate. But now that rhythm is changing. And this is where many people become unprepared. Because after a long season of delay, the mind becomes conditioned to expect more delay. You begin to assume that everything will take time. You begin to believe that nothing moves quickly. You begin to brace yourself for resistance even when resistance is no longer present. But this next phase will not operate like the last one. Archangel Michael declares with authority, what took years to prepare will move in moments to manifest. What was slow in development will be swift in release. And what felt distant will suddenly become present. This is acceleration. And acceleration can feel unfamiliar when you have been conditioned by delay. Because things will begin to happen quickly. Decisions will need to be made faster. Opportunities will appear closer together. Situations will shift without the long pauses you were once used to. And if you are not aware, you may hesitate. Not because you are unsure, but because you are not used to things moving at this speed. But you must understand something clearly. Acceleration is not chaos. It is alignment moving without resistance. It is what happens when everything that needed to be prepared is finally in place. It is what happens when timing, positioning, and readiness all meet at the same point. And when that happens, movement becomes rapid. You may find that something you have been waiting on suddenly resolves. You may find that multiple opportunities appear at once. You may find that decisions you struggled with before now feel obvious. You may find that doors open in ways that seem almost unexpected. And in those moments you must not retreat into the mindset of delay. You must not slow yourself down out of habit. Because this is not the time to question whether it is real. This is the time to move with clarity. Archangel Michael speaks again. Do not let old timing control new movement. What is happening now is not bound by what came before. That means you must adjust. You must allow yourself to move forward without overanalyzing every step. You must trust the awareness you have developed. You must respond to alignment when it appears instead of waiting for it to prove itself repeatedly. Because the proof is already in the preparation you have gone through. The proof is in the growth you have experienced. The proof is in the clarity you now carry. And now that clarity must guide your movement. Because acceleration does not remove responsibility. It increases it. You will need to stay grounded even as things move quickly. You will need to remain focused even as multiple options appear. You will need to stay aligned even as opportunities expand. Because speed without awareness can create mistakes. But speed with alignment creates expansion. And that is what this season is about. Expansion. Not forced. Not rushed. But natural, because everything is now in place. And here is something you must be ready for. Acceleration often brings visibility. Things that were once hidden may become more noticeable. Your movement may become more recognized. Your progress may become more apparent to others. And that visibility can bring new dynamics. New attention. New expectations. But you must not let that distract you. Because your focus must remain on what is in front of you, not on how it is perceived. Because perception does not determine your direction. Alignment does. Archangel Michael declares, move with the flow, but do not lose your center. Rise with the speed, but remain grounded in truth. So, as things begin to move faster, stay steady. Stay aware. Stay aligned with everything you have already learned. Because what is happening now is not overwhelming, it is unfolding. And it is unfolding at the pace it was always meant to. Not the pace of delay, but the pace of release. And once you adjust to this rhythm, you will realize something. This speed is not too much for you. It is exactly what you were prepared for. Type I move with confidence in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1010 is now activated around you. Now this is the moment where everything becomes undeniable, because what you have been hearing is no longer just something you are trying to understand. It is something you are beginning to recognize. Because the truth is, the shift did not start today. It has already begun. And the signs have already been appearing in your life, even if you did not fully connect them until now. That feeling you have had recently that something is different, that something is changing, that something is about to happen, that is not random. That is confirmation. Because when alignment begins to take place, it does not arrive all at once. It reveals itself in patterns, in small shifts, in subtle changes that build until they become impossible to ignore. And if you look closely at your life right now, you will see those patterns. You will see that certain things no longer affect you the way they used to. Situations that once drained your energy now feel distant. Conversations that once pulled you into confusion now feel easier to navigate. You are responding differently, thinking differently, seeing things more clearly. That is a sign. Because before the external changes become visible, the internal shift must take place. And that internal shift has already begun within you. But that is not the only confirmation. There are also changes happening around you. Unexpected moments of clarity. Situations resolving without the struggle you once expected. Small opportunities appearing not fully formed yet, but enough to signal that something is opening. And perhaps the most noticeable sign, timing. Things are starting to align more precisely. You are encountering the right information at the right moment. You are having conversations that seem to answer questions you did not even ask out loud. You are noticing patterns that guide you toward certain decisions. That is not coincidence. That is alignment becoming visible. Archangel Michael reveals this with clarity. The signs are not meant to confuse you. They are meant to prepare you. What you are noticing now is the beginning of what will soon become undeniable. That means what you are experiencing now is only the beginning. Because confirmation always comes in stages. First you feel it. Then you notice it. Then, you experience it fully, and you are moving from the stage of noticing into the stage of experiencing. But there is something important you must not do at this point. You must not dismiss these signs. You must not explain them away. You must not reduce them to coincidence just because they are not fully formed yet. Because that is how many people miss their moment. They wait for everything to become obvious before they believe it. They wait for full confirmation before they respond. But by the time something becomes obvious, the opportunity to align with it early has already passed. And this is not a season for hesitation. This is a season for awareness. You are being shown enough to recognize what is happening. You are being given enough clarity to prepare for what is coming. And that is all you need right now. Because as the process continues, the signs will become stronger. The movement will become clearer. The results will become more visible. But it begins with what you are already experiencing. That feeling that something is shifting. That awareness that things are not the same. That sense that you are stepping into something different. Those are not random emotions. Those are signals. Signals that the prayer you made is no longer in the past. It is active. It is unfolding. It is moving toward you in ways that are already beginning to take shape. Archangel Michael declares, "You asked, and it was heard. You waited, and it was prepared. And now, you are seeing the evidence that it is already in motion. So trust what you are noticing. Trust what you are feeling. Trust the changes that are happening within you and around you. Because they are not leading you into uncertainty. They are leading you into confirmation. And soon that confirmation will no longer require interpretation. It will be clear. It will be visible. It will be undeniable. But for now, this is your signal. This is your awareness. This is your moment to recognize that everything you have been waiting for is already beginning to appear. Type ISE the signs in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1111 is now activated around you. Now this is at the moment where everything you have heard, everything you have felt, everything you have begun to recognize comes together into one clear truth. You are no longer waiting. You are standing at the threshold. And what stands before you is not uncertainty, it is opportunity. But this is the part where many people hesitate. Not because they are not ready, but because stepping forward requires them to release the identity they carried during the waiting. For 3 years you learned how to endure. You learned how to survive delay. You learned how to keep going without visible results. You learned how to manage uncertainty. But now those lessons must transform into something else. They must become confidence. They must become clarity. They must become movement. Because the version of you that survives is not the same version that steps into abundance. And this is your final charge. To step forward as the version of yourself that has already been prepared. Not the version that doubts. Not the version that hesitates. Not the version that questions whether this is real. But the version that recognizes alignment and moves with it. Archangel Michael stands with authority and declares, "The door has opened. The transfer has begun. The time of waiting has ended. Now you must choose, remain in what was or step into what is. And the choice belongs to you. Because everything has already been set in motion. The preparation is complete. The alignment is established. The shift has begun. The only thing that remains is your response. Will you step forward or will you hold back? Will you trust what you have become or retreat into what you used to be? Will you recognize what is in front of you or question it until it passes? Because this moment will not repeat itself in the same way. This is your window. This is your opening. This is the point where everything you have endured begins to make sense, not in theory but in reality. And you will feel it when it happens. A clarity that replaces confusion. A confidence that replaces hesitation. A movement that replaces delay. And in that moment, you will know. You will know that this is what you were being prepared for. You will know that the prayer you made was never forgotten. You will know that everything you went through had a purpose. And you will know that what is now in front of you is yours to step into. But you must move. Not perfectly, not with complete certainty, but with enough awareness to recognize that this is your moment. Because what is waiting for you will not chase you. It will stand open and wait for you to walk through. And once you do, everything changes. Not all at once. Not without responsibility, but in a way that is real, lasting, and aligned with everything you asked for. To take the step. Not tomorrow, not later, but now in your mindset, in your awareness, in your decision. Because the moment you decide, the path begins to respond. Archangel Michael leaves you with this final command. Do not delay what heaven has already released. Step forward and let what was prepared meet you in motion. And this is where your next chapter begins. Type "I step into my next season" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1212 is now activated around you. As you step into this new season, understand this deeply. What had been revealed to you is not meant to remain contained. It is meant to flow, like oil poured out to ignite light in others who are still in darkness. The Lord declares, "Those who sow in faith shall reap in abundance," and this is not a distant promise. It is a living command being spoken over you right now. I feel this strongly. This is your moment to act, not just in receiving, but in releasing. When you give through the PayPal link in the description or scan the QR code on your screen, you are not supporting a channel. You are becoming a vessel through which God reaches another soul standing where you once stood. This is a prophetic act, not a casual decision. What you release now will return to you in ways you cannot yet measure. Do not hesitate. Step into alignment and sow your seed now.